And a Republican congressional candidate running for Georgia's 5th district. So, Angela, I first want to get your response to some events that we saw over the weekend. We saw another police-involved shooting, this time involving a 27-year-old man known as Rayshard Brooks. That led to a little bit more unrest. Of course, that's something that we have seen die down since protests did get a little bit more aggressive the past few weekends. They have turned a little bit more peaceful, but we did see some unrest over the weekend. What is your response to what we saw?
Well, I happen to be from that area, exactly where that shooting took place at. I grew up in that neighborhood. We call it Summerhill. My mother graduated from the high school right behind the gas station, and my grandmother lived the street over. So for me, it was somewhat personal. I'll be the first to say, hey, we need to learn to respect authority, and we definitely need to learn to comply and follow the officer's orders, because that could most definitely spare our lives. But then I'm listening to the people in the community, because I went out to the scene, and they're asking, do you have to shoot or kill a man when he's running away and shoot him in his back? So I think that both sides need to come to the table, and we need to have a conversation and figure out if there are other options. If there is anything that can be done to spare someone's life, even if they are intoxicated. So I guess for me, I may have a little more empathy than most, but I would love to see America resolve our issues when it comes to police and civilian. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is listen to both sides and begin the conversation.
And Angela, the important thing that I took away right there, too, is the idea of having a conversation, because I think as soon as you start putting everything under the same blanket, under the same identity, if you will, that's when things kind of get a little bit more complicated, because each individual instance is very different. For example, this case that we're talking about revolving Rayshard Brooks is different than the George Floyd situation. For example, Brooks did have a taser. It's a little bit different of a situation, but that's not a conversation that necessarily I want to be having right now. I think that's the conversation that a lot of people should be having. But I want to focus, too, on actual tangible reforms, because we heard that President Trump is actually looking at things that could improve the situation that you and I are talking about right now. It could be a nationwide standard regarding use of force, and also a database to track some of the misconduct conducted by police officers. Do you think that's a good first step, if you will, in order to meet some of the reforms that are being called for?
I think that is a good first step, but this administration had already begun the first steps when they signed, the criminal justice reform for the First Step Act. When we talk about criminal justice reform, it starts with the law enforcement. I mean, they're usually the ones to make the arrest, and then it goes on to the courts. But, I was at the White House last week, and we had a listening session in regards to ways that we can improve community relations. And I think that residency requirements should be something that we look at. Why not put police in the communities that they actually live in and allow them to police those communities? That way, they'll have a better rapport with the people, and maybe we won't see so many of these one-on-one confrontations where it all turns bad, because the police are afraid of what might happen to them, and then the civilians are also afraid. So I think it's important right now to bring the police and the community together.